Picture this. You're sitting at your kitchen table on a Sunday morning, scrolling through personal finance content, feeling motivated, feeling like today's the day you finally get your money situation under control. You've got your coffee, you've got your notebook, and you're ready to absorb all this wisdom about budgeting and saving and investing. And after about 3 hours of this, you've learned that you should track every single expense, cut out your daily coffee, use 17 different budgeting apps, negotiate your cable bill, open a high yield savings account that pays 0.3% more interest than your current one, and basically spend every waking moment obsessing over nickels and dimes. So you try it. You really do. You download the apps, you start tracking everything, you feel incredibly productive for about 2 weeks. And then you realize something devastating. You're more stressed about money than you were before. You're spending hours managing your finances, and you're actually not any wealthier. In fact, you might be poor because you're so exhausted from tracking every transaction that you stopped focusing on the things that actually matter. Here's what nobody wants to admit. Most financial advice is actively making you poor. Not because the advice is technically wrong, but because it's focusing your time and energy on activities that have almost no impact on your actual wealth, while completely ignoring the decisions that actually matter. It's like a doctor telling someone with a severed artery to put a Band-Aid on a paper cut. Yeah, the Band-Aid advice is technically correct, but you're missing the massive problem that's actually killing you. My name is AD, and I've spent an embarrassing amount of time analyzing why people follow financial advice religiously and still end up broke. And what I've discovered is that the financial advice industry, whether intentional or not, has created a system that keeps you busy, keeps you engaged, keeps you consuming content, but rarely actually builds wealth. If you're tired of following all the rules and still feeling broke, if you've ever wondered why you're doing everything right but nothing's improving, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button, because today we're going to expose exactly how financial advice is designed to keep you poor. Let's start with the most obvious example of terrible financial advice that everyone has heard and most people have tried to follow: the coffee advice. You know the one. If you just stopped buying that $5 coffee every day, you'd save $1,825 per year. And if you invested that money over 30 years at 8% returns, you'd have over $200,000. This advice is everywhere. Every personal finance book, every blog post, every well-meaning relative at Thanksgiving dinner. And on the surface, the math checks out. $5 times 365 days equals $1,825 annually. Compound that over 30 years, and yes, you get a big number. The math is correct. The advice is still terrible. Here's why. Let's say you actually follow this advice. You give up your daily coffee. You start making coffee at home. You save your $5 per day. Congratulations, you're now saving $150 per month. That's real money. But here's what actually happens in the real world. You're now spending an extra 20 minutes every morning making coffee at home. You're buying coffee beans, filters, maybe a nicer coffee maker so the coffee doesn't taste terrible. You're cleaning the machine. You're dealing with the hassle. And after about 3 weeks of this, you're miserable. You're starting your day slightly annoyed. You've turned your morning routine into a reminder that you're sacrificing something you enjoyed. But you stick with it because you're disciplined. You're doing the right thing. You're following the advice. Month 1, you save $150. Month 2, you save another $150. You're now $300 richer than you would have been. You feel good about this. You're making progress. Then month 3 hits. Your car needs new tires, $600. Or your laptop dies and you need a new one for work, $1,200. Or you have a medical expense, or your rent goes up, or literally any of the 1,000 things that happen in real life happens. And suddenly, that $450 you saved over 3 months is gone. Not because you were irresponsible, but because life happens. But here's the real problem with the coffee advice. It's not that it's wrong, it's that it's focusing your energy on the wrong thing entirely. While you're spending mental energy and willpower on saving $5 per day, you're completely ignoring the fact that you're paying $400 per month for a car you can't afford. You're ignoring the fact that you haven't asked for a raise in 3 years. You're ignoring the fact that your housing costs are eating 45% of your income instead of 30%. The coffee advice is focusing you on a decision that impacts maybe 2% of your financial outcome, while you completely ignore the decisions that impact the other 98%. And this is the fundamental problem with most financial advice. It's optimizing for the wrong variables. Let me put this in perspective with some actual numbers. Let's say you make $60,000 per year. If you cut out your daily coffee, you save about 3% of your income annually. That's $1,825. Now, let's say instead of focusing on coffee, you focused on negotiating a 10% raise. That's $6,000 annually. You could buy coffee every single day and still be $4,175 ahead compared to the person who gave up coffee but didn't negotiate their salary. Or let's say instead of coffee, you focused on housing. The average American pays about $1,600 per month in rent. If you found a place that was $200 cheaper per month, you'd save $2,400 annually. Again, you could still buy your coffee and be ahead. Or transportation. The average car payment is now over $700 per month. If you bought a reliable used car instead of financing a new one and saved $300 per month in payments, that's $3,600 annually. Once again, buy the coffee, still come out ahead. Do you see the pattern here? The coffee is not the problem. The coffee was never the problem. The coffee is a distraction from the actual problems. And yet, this is the advice that gets repeated constantly because it feels actionable. It feels like something you can control. It feels like progress. But it's not progress. It's busy work. It's financial theater. It's the illusion of taking control while actually avoiding the hard decisions that matter. Here's another piece of advice that sounds great, but actually makes you poorer. Track every single expense and create a detailed budget with 15 different categories. This advice is ubiquitous in personal finance content. You're supposed to categorize every transaction, track every dollar, know exactly where every penny goes. And the promise is that once you see where your money is going, you'll naturally make better decisions and save more. Sounds logical, right? If you don't know where your money is going, how can you control it? The problem is that this advice confuses awareness with action. Just because you know you're spending $400 a month on restaurants doesn't mean you're going to change that behavior. In fact, for most people, the opposite happens. Here's the reality of what happens when you try to track every expense. Week 1, you're incredibly diligent. You're entering every transaction into your app, you're categorizing everything, you feel productive, you feel like you're taking control. Week 2, you start to get tired of it. It's tedious. You forget to log a few transactions. You're not sure if that $23 purchase should go under groceries or household supplies, and you spend 5 minutes thinking about it, even though it literally doesn't matter. Week 3, you're now several days behind on entering transactions. You're looking at your credit card statement, trying to remember what that $17.43 charge from 3 days ago was for. Was that lunch? Was that gas? You don't remember. You guess. The data is now inaccurate. Week 4, you've given up entirely. You feel guilty about it. You feel like you failed. You tried to be responsible with money, and you couldn't even track your expenses for a month. What's wrong with you? But here's the thing that nobody tells you. Nothing is wrong with you. The advice is wrong. Tracking every single expense is not actually helping you build wealth. It's consuming time and mental energy that could be spent on activities that actually matter. Now, I'm not saying you should have zero awareness of your spending. I'm saying that obsessive tracking is counterproductive. The person who checks their spending once a month and makes big strategic decisions about housing, transportation, and income is going to build way more wealth than the person who tracks every transaction daily but never addresses their $600 car payment. Here's what actually works. Instead of tracking every expense, identify your 3 biggest expense categories. For most people, this is housing, transportation, and food. These 3 categories represent probably 70% of your spending. Make big strategic decisions about these 3 categories once or twice a year. That's it. That's the whole system. Should I move to a cheaper apartment? Should I get rid of my car payment? Should I start cooking more meals at home? Answer those 3 questions, make changes, and then stop thinking about it. You don't need to track whether you spent $47 or $52 on groceries this week. That level of detail is not helping you. But financial advice focuses you on the detailed tracking because it's measurable, it's quantifiable, you can see progress, you can feel productive. Meanwhile, you're completely ignoring the fact that your housing is too expensive and you haven't increased your income in years. And here's the thing. These aren't the only examples. There's a whole list of financial advice that sounds smart but keeps you focused on the wrong things. The emergency fund obsession that tells you to save 6 months of expenses before investing anything, which means you're missing years of compound growth while you build this massive cash cushion. The debt payoff dogma that says eliminate all debt before investing, even when you could be earning 10% returns while paying 4% interest on a student loan. The diversification disaster, where you end up with 10 different funds and spend hours rebalancing when you'd be better off with one total market index fund. The side hustle myth that has you burning out for $10 per hour when you could negotiate a raise worth far more with 0 extra hours. The frugality fallacy that turns you into someone who drives across town to save 5 cents on gas while ignoring the fact that you haven't increased your income in years. The retirement calculator trap that shows you such a scary number that you give up entirely instead of just consistently saving 15 to 20%. The tax optimization rabbit hole where you spend 40 hours to save $300 instead of spending that time on income growth. The financial literacy scam that assumes information is the problem when it's actually behavior and systems. All of this advice has the same problem. It keeps you busy. It keeps you engaged. It keeps you consuming content, but it rarely actually builds wealth because it's focused on optimizing tiny variables while ignoring the massive decisions that determine your financial outcome. So if most financial advice is making you poorer, what should you actually do? Here's the framework that actually works. Stop optimizing for small things and start making big strategic decisions. First, housing. Get this right because it's your largest expense. For most people, housing should be 25 to 30% of gross income, not 40 to 50%. If you're spending too much on housing, that single decision is crushing your ability to build wealth. One big decision about where you live matters more than 1,000 small decisions about groceries. Second, transportation. Stop financing depreciating assets. Buy reliable used cars with cash or minimal financing. The difference between a $700 car payment and no car payment is $8,400 annually. That's more money than all your coffee and subscription service optimization combined. Third, income. Spend your energy here, not on clipping coupons. Negotiate raises, switch jobs, develop valuable skills. Increase your income by 20 to 30% over a few years, and you'll build more wealth than decades of extreme frugality. Fourth, automation. Set up automatic savings and investments so you're not relying on willpower and decision making. The system should work whether you're motivated or not. Fifth, simple investing. Total market index fund. Automatic contributions, never look at it, except maybe once a year. That's it. That's the whole strategy. Everything else is complexity that probably reduces your returns. Sixth, reasonable lifestyle. Don't be so frugal that you're miserable. Enjoy your money on things that genuinely improve your life. Just make sure you're saving 15 to 20% first. That's it. 6 things, not 60 things, not 600 things. 6 strategic decisions that matter way more than all the small optimizations combined. Here's the truth that the financial advice industry doesn't want you to know. Building wealth is not complicated. It doesn't require constant engagement with financial content. It doesn't require obsessive tracking and optimization. It doesn't require you to become a financial expert. It requires a few big strategic decisions executed consistently over time. That's it. But that advice doesn't keep you engaged. That advice doesn't make you feel like you need more information. That advice doesn't generate clicks and views and ad revenue. So instead, you get advice that keeps you busy, keeps you stressed, keeps you consuming content, but rarely actually builds wealth. You get advice that focuses on coffee instead of housing costs. You get advice that has you tracking every expense instead of negotiating your salary. You get advice that keeps you playing small instead of thinking big. Most financial advice is making you poorer because it's optimized for engagement, not for outcomes. It's designed to keep you in the system, not to get you out of it. The person who figures this out, who stops consuming financial advice and starts making big strategic decisions, who focuses on the few things that matter instead of the thousand things that don't, that person is going to build wealth while everyone else is still tracking their coffee purchases. Your choice. Keep following advice that makes you feel productive while keeping you broke, or ignore most of it and focus on what actually matters. The math doesn't lie. The person who makes 3 big decisions right will build more wealth than the person who makes 1,000 small decisions perfectly. Stop letting financial advice distract you from building real wealth. Make the big decisions, automate what you can, and then get on with your life. You don't need to think about money constantly to build wealth. In fact, you'll probably build more wealth if you stop thinking about it so much and just let the system work.